Welcome to Northlandia, a place to bring your curiosity, because here you will find curiosities. I'm Wyatt Buckner with the Duluth News Tribune, and I will be your guide as we discover the unique and fascinating stories here in the Northland. Here we celebrate the region's distinctive people, places, and history. In this episode, we take you back up the North Shore and look inside the 3M Birthplace Museum. Let's venture forth into Northlandia. To walk us through the history of a seemingly innocuous building on a street corner in Two Harbors, I'm joined again by News Tribune reporter Joe Bowen. Joe, welcome back to the Northlandia podcast.
It's good to be back, Wyatt.
Yeah, so you, me, and photographer Clint Austin, to visit this museum up in Two Harbors, we braved the most recent April snowstorm, facing wind, snow, ice, mixture of it all.
Cold temperatures,
pretty much everything you can expect in April in Minnesota, I suppose.
That's right.
So why did we brave the storm and head north to Two Harbors?
Well, because we thought it was an important thing to check out. I think a lot of people maybe don't know that the museum is there, and the whole point of Northlandia is to kind of point out things people might not know about.
Gotcha. And before we really get into what it is, how did you come across it?
I had heard about it briefly at one point. I have some friends who live in Two Harbors, or at least have lived there at one point. But then, just like pretty much every Northlandia story, we have a list of potential story ideas, and I thought it seemed interesting.
Gotcha. So I guess walk me through what is the history of this museum and why is it in Two Harbors?
Sure. Well, the history of the museum itself is pretty simple. It was a former dentist's office for a long time in Two Harbors there, and it was dedicated in 1992 to coincide with I think it'd be the 90th anniversary of 3M's founding. The reason it's in Two Harbors is, shockingly, that's where 3M was founded. It wasn't there for very long. Production, everything moved from Two Harbors to Duluth in 1905 and then to St. Paul in 1910. But indeed, 3M, which is one of the biggest companies in the country, was indeed founded in Two Harbors, population 3,000. Wasn't there very long, a couple years, but indeed was there at the very beginning.
John Dwan, which was an attorney at the time, had his law offices here, and this is also known as the John Dwan Building. So he had his offices on the second floor and was also the first secretary of the Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing Company. So he had the Articles of Incorporation, and the Articles of Incorporation were signed in this building on the second floor.
That was Ellen Lynch. She's the executive director of the Lake County Historical Society. They actually operate 3 different museums. The Birthplace Museum is one of them.
So talking about what is all in the museum?
Well, it's a lot of, historic 3M products. So there's like 50 different Scotch tapes and things like that from different, eras. There's a lot of testing equipment, kind of period appropriate stuff like that. There's also a mannequin of John Dwan that spooked me twice, you once, and our photographer Clint once, because it's life size and you don't necessarily expect to just see a man sitting there in an otherwise darkened museum room. Also, what's in there is some stuff that's actually kind of relevant to 3M's beginnings in Two Harbors, because a lot of that stuff, like the Scotch tape and stuff, that wasn't invented until 1925, and 3M had long since left Two Harbors. But some of the stuff in the museum is indeed, relevant might be the right word there, to its Two Harbors founding. So there's the desk that John Dwan used in his second-story office there. The presumption there is that that's probably the desk where the Articles of Incorporation for the company were first signed, because John Dwan was a lawyer, and he was the secretary of the company at first. So presumably, if he's the guy who's in charge of those sorts of documents and this is his desk, it's probably where the company was founded, on that literal block of wood. There's also some kind of historic samples of sandpaper that were rock mined from that Crystal Bay mine, 40 miles north of Two Harbors. There's also a pulley and some other bits of wood that are from kind of that crushing plant. You mine the rock, crush the rock, ship it, that sort of thing, and then turn it into sandpaper. So that's mostly what's in the museum. And then there's some kind of other bits and pieces of looks like there's a game or something like that in there, but it was out of order. But by and large, it's a kind of a showcase of 3M products, and then a showcase of some stuff that is contemporary to 3M's Two Harbors beginnings.
I appreciate you giving me the benefit of the doubt that I was only spooked once by the mannequin. I was spooked at least 2 or 3 times, even when I was aware that it was there. It was just kind of in the corner of your eye, and I was backing up, and it's very spooky. Very lifelike.
Shockingly lifelike until you get up close.
And what would you say of all the things there, what stood out to you the most? What did you find the most interesting that was there?
Honestly, the thing that was most interesting to me was they have some early correspondence among kind of 3M's founders, and it's a lot of kind of ho-hum company business, hey, here's the thing you asked for, I've attached it, I hope this letter finds you well, goodbye, sort of stuff. But it uses the original 3M letterhead. Now it's just the number 3 and the letter M, right? But back in the day, it was the Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing Corporation, and it has this kind of big, elaborate, old-timey looking logo. I thought that was really fascinating, just to kind of see that And then there's a lot of the actual samples they have of both corundum and anorthosite, I think that's how you pronounce it, in there to kind of illustrate, for lack of a better word, what the founders were kind of up against when they found out that the mine north of town really wasn't worth much, so to speak. So I think they're in roughly equal proportions to how much was actually in the ground. And the other, one of the things that's kind of cool about those two rocks is I think beyond just kind of being illustrative of this is what was in the ground, they also kind of give you a sense of what the problem was too with that mine, which is that the corundum there, you can tell just from looking at it, it's more abrasive. Like it's like this kind of scraggly looking rock. Like it looks like a rougher rock, for lack of a better way to put it. And the anorthosite is kind of this smooth stone that if I was walking past it, I wouldn't even, I wouldn't give it a second look because it looks like a rock. The corundum looks special, looks different, looks like the kind of thing you could actually use as an abrasive. And I think that's kind of illustrative of exactly what they were running into there. Is here's a whole bunch of smooth rock where we're hoping for rough rock, and there's not much rough rock, so what do we do? Because that's basically the plot of their time in Two Harbors is how do we pivot away from this unfortunate discovery that the stuff we thought would be in the ground is not really much of it is in the ground.
All right, Joe, so talk to me about why were they up in the North Shore to begin with? Why was Two Harbors and northward the area that they chose to start this company in?
Well, there's a lot of prospecting in general in that area, but the general assumption was that some of these veins of corundum that are in Michigan, I believe, might have made their way underneath Lake Superior to kind of the Two Harbors, northern Minnesota area. So they went to where they suspected the corundum is because they wanted to make millstones out of it because it's the right consistency to make stuff like that out of.
So historically, the North Shore has been known for prospectors hoping to strike it rich. At first, it was gold and copper prospectors who thought that the veins that started in Michigan's Upper Peninsula would run all the way underneath Lake Superior and up the rocky shoreline into the forest beyond. So prospecting was huge up in Beaver Bay, starting in 1859. Was when the first prospectors arrived by steamboat up there. So in the vein of mineral prospecting, the thought was that corundum was on the North Shore as well. And corundum was a key natural ingredient of grinding stones. So grinding stones were made out of corundum. So it was thought that, hey, there's only one other abrasive manufacturer in the United States at the time. We would strike it rich if this actually was corundum. Surveys suggested that it was corundum. So they decided to, let's buy this plot of land and try our luck at mining corundum here on Crystal Bay, which is about 40 miles up the shore near Little Marais. So they signed the Articles of Incorporation, sought funders for the initial venture, and it was 5 local businessmen that formed the Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing Company. And in 1903, they finally built what would be known as Crystal Bay Mine and started actually mining the product. It wasn't until March 1903 that they were able to actually test the product over in Chicago. It was mixed results came back, but they decided to proceed anyways, just because it was thought that they would strike it rich, with the corundum and selling it to different markets.
So I know we kind of alluded this a little bit earlier, but they didn't exactly have a whole lot of success up along the North Shore. So talking about what was exactly the issues that led into the rocky start of this company, pun fully intended, stolen from your headline.
Literally rocky. So basically they suspected there would be a whole bunch of corundum in the ground there. There really wasn't. There was some, but not a ton. What was mostly in the ground there was mostly anorthosite, which is not good for much. And so what they ended up doing was basically turning it all into sandpaper. If you grind it all up, it kind of is good enough for sandpaper. Apparently, it's not very great. And that's actually once they moved to St. Paul, that's where their first, in modern terms, we call it an innovation lab. Back in the day, they probably just called it like research and development or whatever. But basically, their St. Paul plant had this little lab in the back where they would mess with different abrasives to try and improve their sandpaper. And that kind of started with them way back in the day in Two Harbors going, well, how can we make lemonade out of these lemons? We don't have a very abrasive rock in this mine that we've built, so what do we do with it? And they tried to make sandpaper, did it for a while, and then they did it well enough, I guess, to keep expanding.
So obviously they had to pivot out of that difficult situation they were in up there. But how did they go from these issues and somehow turn it into becoming the Fortune 500 company, the extremely successful company that they're known as today?
Well, part of it was that they got about $200,000 from Lucius Ordway. He kind of became a big investor, moved the company to Duluth to open a sandpaper plant. That was actually apparently 3M's first manufacturing facility, like in company history, was in Duluth. And basically what they did, though, is they pivoted from millstones, which was what they were originally trying to manufacture from the Two Harbors area, from the Crystal Bay mine, to sandpaper, because if you kind of grind up what you get, it's good enough for sandpaper. So there's actually a sample of Crystal Bay sandpaper in that Two Harbors museum, in the Birthplace Museum, that I guess as far as sandpaper goes, seems all right, but, they kind of went from there. They pivoted. They, for lack of a better term, made lemonade out of lemons there. I've used that metaphor twice. I apologize to our listeners.
Yeah, and obviously you talked about how he got that big investment. That came from after a period of losing investors. It was kind of just John Dwan just kind of pushing forward and keeping this going, and having to have his original people sell their investments kind of at a loss.
John Dwan really stuck with the company when a lot of the original founders kind of sold their shares at a loss, and he really found other investors, got connected with some people in the business community down in St. Paul, and really believed in the company. So John Dwan definitely helped, advance 3M, because it was a lot of struggle.
Yeah, apparently the Two Harbors years were kind of the struggle years more than anything, going, well, what do we do with this mostly useless rock? What can we do with quite a lot of stuff that you can't do much with? Then once they kind of got on track, they moved to Duluth and onward.
Yeah, we like to see the failed mining venture kind of helped spur kind of the innovative quality that still remains at 3M today. So out of failure came triumph.
So going back to where it all started, the story behind this building goes back more than 100 years ago. Why do you think the building and the history behind it still has relevance today?
I think it's just because this sounds a little cheesy, but it's where it all started. I mean, 3M employs several thousand people across the world. It's got a giant campus in suburban St. Paul. It's a huge company, especially in Minnesota, and it basically started in, the second floor of a legal office in a small town in northern Minnesota. And yeah, it kind of left pretty quickly. It did, it kind of pulled a Bob Dylan, Judy Garland sort of thing, but it nonetheless is from there. No matter where it is now, it's started there.
Everybody knows 3M as it is today, but the story of how it got started is just remarkable. The amount of blood, sweat, and tears that were poured in from 5 entrepreneurs who really, it was somebody associated with the railroad, a meat market salesman, the doctor, and an attorney really started 3M, and through their belief of the company and the product and their vision, that really kind of inspired the innovativeness of 3M today. And just that hard work, perseverance, really grew 3M. While it's just a small blip in their early history, their spirit lives on through the company.
Well, Joe, I think we'll wrap up there. Thanks again for joining us. We look forward to having you back again soon.
I look forward to it too.
And thank you for joining us on this venture into Northlandia. To read the article for this week's column, as well as see photos by Clint Austin and video produced by myself, visit duluthnewstribune.com/topics/Northlandia. Next week, News Tribune reporter Terry Caddo takes us a little south to Renshaw, where there's an extensive collection of taxidermy. You can find all of our episodes on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you or someone you know has a unique story that you believe could have a place here in Northlandia, let us know by emailing northlandia@duluthnew's.com. Join us again next week and discover the extraordinary stories that you just might miss if you're not in the right place at the right time, ready to step off the beaten path with no rush to return, here in Northlandia.